And we are back on the WHHI-TV Daily News. With me now is Alex Brown. He is, of course, a town councilman, and he is also a member of the Finance and Administrative Committee. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today because, believe it or not, we've got to pass a budget coming up here in June.
Yes.
Yeah.
We run on a fiscal year, June to July, and we are in the midst of sort of putting together our process, having discussions amongst council members, so that we will be able to adopt a fiscal year 2025 budget in June of 2024.
Yeah, June, I mean, it's coming up very quickly.
Sure,
It'll be here before we know it. So talk to us a little bit about what goes into that planning. I know you obviously want to focus on the community needs. You have your strategic plan.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about all those plates you're spinning to get it into one budget.
Absolutely. So the strategic plan is really what's driving everything, okay? Mm-hmm. And we will be having a workshop around that topic early March, right? Okay. Although we've got a lot on the plate from what we've been talking about the last couple of years, sure. Right? So if you keep that in mind, and I'll just use some examples, the reinvestment into our community, our capital improvements project list, okay? It's pretty extensive, right? Folks are asking us for pickleball, yeah. The soccer fields are worn out, we've got a beach that needs to be renourished, so all of those items go into our capital improvements project fund, and that's pretty extensive, right? Sure. So we're not necessarily looking to penny pinch or cut from here and there. We understand that those are ongoing needs that have to happen. So now finding the buckets of money to push into that fund to make sure they can accomplish.
Right. And we talked a little bit before we started filming about where some of those buckets of money come from, because
sure,
I think
absolutely.
Lots of people might think that the bulk of it comes from property taxes, but that really isn't the case.
That's correct. Last year, as we all know, the county went through a reassessment period, okay? Property values have gone up,
yes.
Which means tax revenues have gone up, right? And to offset that, we actually lowered our millage last year, right? So that's one pot of money, but we've also, have the luxury of a huge A-tax collection, a huge hospitality tax collection, right. Business license, okay? So we're sort of pulling from each one of those revenue streams so that we can accomplish those goals that we've been talking about in the strategic plan.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the size of the budget, because, some people might say, oh gosh, that's a huge budget. Why do we need that big of a budget? Why do we need so many people employed by the town?
Sure.
But talk to us a little bit about the growth that has happened and maybe some of the new things that you've taken on as a town. Like, for example, again, before we started filming, you were talking about the short-term rental ordinances.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, Hilton Head has grown as far as the needs of the community from when we were first incorporated, right? We now have fire and rescue. That was something that we never had when we first incorporated. And, as we continue to evolve, and rightfully so, we noticed that we've had sort of issues with short-term rentals and how we regulate and enforce and that sort of thing. And that has sort of inched our budget up a bit, okay? You've got to have someone to help us with the permits. You've got to have someone to deal with code enforcement, right? So just managing any new initiative that we have ultimately is going to cost us a little bit more money, right? And over time, that just continues to build up.
Right. But I think the interesting thing about the short-term rental, for example, is that really was a need that the community brought to you.
Absolutely.
They said, we want help with this.
Absolutely.
This is getting a little bit out of control.
Absolutely.
So that was your answer to that.
There you go. And to offset and make sure that property taxes did not rise, of course, now we have this permitting process where ultimately we're looking for the short-term rental issue to pay for itself. But it goes from, if our budget was, let's say, $100 million before we started that initiative, and now it's $102 million, well, that's an increase in budget, but it's also an increase in revenue, right? So that's the piece I think that we need to be saying very loudly and transparently.
And I appreciate that. So as this process continues to go on before we get to June, I'm sure you'll be back to tell us more about it.
I will, absolutely.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And we'll be back with more, so stay with us.